and arousal biological, but not for deciding. That said, I don't think Facebook should be deciding, and wouldn't they spend their time more productively taking down racist material, which they appear to fall short. So a good email there, Paul. Someone says, look, male nipples and female nipples should be equally treated. There's lots of males and females who don't have a sexual connection with nipples. Why is there a problem? And Robbie says, spend an afternoon on the beach in the Mediterranean. Nipples everywhere. The novelty disappears in minutes. How conservative is too conservative? That we're even discussing this feels like the final motions of the issue. In 40 years, this will be quaint. And someone says, Wallace, would you... Simon says, Wallace, using my imagination, but what about Michelangelo's David? Is that offensive? Would that be banned on Facebook? And someone says, Wallace, would you want men walking around with penises exposed? I have no answer. It's 5 away from...
I think the answer is no.
What about during Men's
Health Week? As a woman, I can say that.
No, not at all. So, point well taken on that. Now, there's been a lot of debate over the past week about speeding, so briefly on this one. It comes after new evidence from NZTA came out that speed limits are far too high for the conditions on most of our roads. Some transport commentators like Clive Matthew Wilson from the Dog and Lemon Guide say that any lowering of speed would see backlash for the government. The National Party says it'll slow down the economy. More than 380 people died on our roads last year, and this year we're tracking for a similar figure. That's a jump from 6 years ago when it was around 250. So I just wanted to get your thoughts, really, around the panel about speeding and that idea of, over time, lowering the speed toll from 100 to 80 or 60 on, not all, but many of our open roads.
Are we talking about open roads? Because I think if the roads are designed well, we can afford to go pretty fast. But it's those other situations where, sometimes I think 50 is too high in some situations.
Yeah.
Look, I agree. I mean, I think the issue is infrastructure. We've got very poor roading infrastructure, and higher speed limits don't necessarily align with that, unfortunately.
We're talking about lowering the speed limit because it's a matter of physics, as one panellist said last week. The fact of the matter is that you are less likely to die at a slower speed. So would you endorse that idea of going along the open road at a good 80 or 90, Victoria?
No, I'd find it boring. It's supposed to be more fuel efficient too, isn't it? I quite like the speed limit where it is, if I'm honest.
Just because it's boring, because you don't get excited enough by a slower speed.
Well, I'm an A to B person, so if I'm going to B, I want to be there as fast as possible. So,
how about
being honest, okay.
How about they do your deal where if they drop the speed limit, they bring something back, so you're allowed to text or drink while doing it. Yeah, so it's 80 k's, but you can drink. So have a lane for that. It's 70 k's, but you can text.
Look, this sounds completely reasonable.
Boy.
Just throwing it out there.
Do you happen to be standing for the Wellington City Council at any time, Raven? Or is this some sort of policy push this afternoon?
I'm also concerned. I mean, is this just a thing to lower, to raise revenue? Because are they trying to make?
They're trying to save lives, Raven can.
Okay, then I'm all for that. I'm in favour of life saving.
All right, very good. Loss discovered this afternoon with Victoria Stewart and Raven Can. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
Thank you to Ali for producing. Checkpoint next. I'm back from 3:45 tomorrow. See ya.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, planes, ships, drones and tanks, and that's just part of the Defence Force's $20 billion shopping list. A Wanaka woman who gave birth on an office floor says no other woman should have to go through what she did. Are maternity services in the regions up to scratch? We talk to the Southern DHB. Witnesses to the Christchurch Mosque shootings question the way donations are being distributed, and why the Housing Minister reckons millionaires should be eligible for KiwiBuild. Climate activists take a dead turtle to an Auckland Council meeting, and American retail giant Costco is heading west of Auckland, that is.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leata tēnei. The threat of climate change has underpinned a $20 billion plan to upgrade the country's defence capabilities over the next decade. Nearly every major item is earmarked for an upgrade as part of the Defence Force's latest capability plan. That includes $1 billion upgrading the country's ageing Hercules fleet with new planes called Super Hercules. The Defence Minister Ron Mark says New Zealand has accepted responsibility to support smaller Pacific nations, which involves dealing with the impact of climate change, including warming oceans, rising seas and dwindling fish stocks.
Over time, there will be an increased requirement for our defence and other security forces to respond with humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, more search and rescue missions, and potentially stability operations.
The Defence Minister, Ron Mark. The Auckland Council has voted to declare a climate change emergency. At a packed meeting where public submissions were being led by teenagers and young adults, Council has voted to make the declaration and to move towards new policies to prevent climate change. Generation Zero, representing high school climate strikers, said many of them are about to turn 18 and councillors would lose their votes in this year's election if they didn't act. Sid Mehita put the councillors on notice.
We need to see that all of you actually have some skin in the game in this. So by endorsing the plan, by putting it out to consultation, and by actually championing it during your re-election campaigns, that's how you'll show us that you're actually putting actions to your words.
Generation Zero climate change activist Sid Mehita. A large group who witnessed the Christchurch Mosque massacre fear people like them have been forgotten. Up till now, of the millions that have been donated, only $12,000 has been given to each witness, compared to $45,000 for the bereaved and $24,000 to the injured. But worshippers at the Linwood Masjid say many witnesses have struggled as much, if not more, than those with physical injuries through the mental trauma they've suffered and should receive the same. Shooting witness Mohammed Samir says it's about honouring the wishes of those who donated their money.
They didn't give a message saying, okay, this is for the deceased, this much for the injured, and, nothing for the witnesses. Like, it was given for the victims, and we are all victims.
A witness to the mosque terror attack, Mohammed Samir. The final payment from victim support is due to be handed out by the end of this month, but it's yet to be decided who will get what. The acting GCSB Minister David Parker has revealed there was a half-hour gap between the Finance Minister linking National to claims of a hack at Treasury and the spy agency saying no hack had occurred. It's the first time the government's provided a full picture of the communications 2 weeks ago after the opposition used a search of the Treasury website to get budget-sensitive information. The GCSB Minister Andrew Little is currently overseas. Speaking on his behalf, Mr Parker said the GCSB contacted Mr Little's office at 8:43 p.m. on Tuesday, May the 28th, about 30 minutes after Mr Robertson had put out his statement.
A dandelion, if I make a wish on you, and then I set you free.
To the next story, a replacement for a stolen ATM won't be housed at the Murupara police station, despite community calls to put it there. The small Bay of Plenty town has been without a cash machine since thieves ripped out the only one from the credit union building last week. The bank has also stopped handling cash since the robbery and hasn't committed to bringing it back to the town. At a community meeting last night, it was suggested an ATM could be placed at the police station as people felt safe there, but the police say that doesn't fit with their core role and responsibilities. Costco, the world's largest or second largest retailer, has announced it is opening a store in Auckland. The American company says 350 full-time jobs will be created at its site in the Westgate shopping centre in the northwest of the city. Katie Scotcher reports.
The Westgate Costco will include a petrol station, tyre centre, food court, optometrist, hearing aid services, supermarkets and homewares. Construction of the 14,000 square metre warehouse is estimated to cost around $9 as Costco is still waiting for the required regulatory consents. Costco has almost 800 warehouses worldwide, including 11 in Australia. I tamaki makoto ko Katie Scotcher aho.
It's 5:05. The veteran football Ferns defender Abby Ersick says they can no longer be content with just being competitive against other nations. The 19th ranked Ferns take on European champions the Netherlands in their opening game at the FIFA World Cup in France tonight. This is the 5th time New Zealand has competed in the World Cup finals, and they've never managed to win or got out of pool play. Ersick, who's one of 8 players in the squad to have played more than 100 games for New Zealand, says gone are the days when they simply stack their defence.
We have to have some kind of attacking style of play. Will we defend for a lot of the game? Yes. But if we can take our chances when we do get them, and we will get them, we will get a couple, we need to be really, really clinical in that part of the field, and that's a big challenge for some of our strikers.
Abby Ersick. Meanwhile, the Wellington Phoenix have lost long-time skipper Andrew Durante. After 11 years with the Wellington club, the 37-year-old has confirmed on social media he's leaving, with reports suggesting he'll join former Phoenix coach Mark Rudin at the newly established Western United in Melbourne. Born in Australia, Durante switched allegiances to New Zealand in 2013 and went on to play 24 internationals for the All Whites. The Golden State Warriors have kept their hopes alive of a third straight NBA basketball title with a 106-105 point win over or against the Toronto Raptors, and gave 5 of the best of 7 final series. The best of 7 series resumes on Friday, with Toronto leading 3-2. That's the news.
The price of a house.
We have houses being built in places where there is no demand, and they just don't want to buy those KiwiBuild houses. So I think the scheme is a dog.
The price of a premium.
There's nothing like what we have in New Zealand anywhere else in the world. The problem is it's been far too cheap.
And the cost of war.
What happens is when we leave too quickly, it creates a vacuum, and ISIS come back in and fill that vacuum. So we have to be absolutely confident that's not going to happen again.
Cash In, Morning Report with Corin Dan and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, are crop covers preventing bees from doing their job? A new study examining protective kiwi fruit crop covers in the Bay of Plenty. And after 10, broadcaster, writer and science journalist Angela Saini exposes racial biases in science. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel. Mainly fine with isolated showers, occasional rain developing tomorrow. Waitomo to Manawatu, including Taupo, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Mostly cloudy with isolated showers in the west. Fine in the east. Rain spreading from the north tomorrow with some heavy falls and possible thunderstorms in Bay of Plenty. For Horowhenua through to Wellington, mostly cloudy, a few showers clearing tomorrow morning. Nelson, a few showers developing this evening, turning to rain tomorrow morning and easing later in the day. For Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly cloudy, occasional rain developing tomorrow. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain with some heavy falls, easing to scattered showers tomorrow morning, then gradually clearing from the afternoon. Southland and Otago, high cloud thickening, scattered rain developing from the afternoon, clearing by tomorrow evening. Chatham Islands, cloudy at times, a few showers developing tomorrow. It's 5:08.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The government will shell out more than $1 billion on new Super Hercules aircraft as part of its $20 billion defence capability plan revealed today. The plan lays out when new military hardware, including satellite surveillance systems, will be purchased and how much it will cost. It also includes personnel, with moves to boost troop numbers by 6,000 by 2035 so that the Army can respond to multiple incidents at once. Michael Kropp has the details.
Setting itself up as a force for the future with $20 billion of upgrades planned by 2030.
We have accepted a responsibility to support smaller Pacific Island nations who do not have the capacity to respond to these disasters which befall them. And to do that, we have to have the capability.
Defence Minister Ron Mark says much of this plan is driven by climate change and the effect it will have on our corner of the South Pacific.
Over time, there will be an increased requirement for our defence and other security forces to respond with humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, more search and rescue missions, and potentially stability operations.
A warming world with acidifying and rising seas may see low-lying Pacific Island countries disappear and contribute to resource scarcity.
There will be increased competition as people run into conflict with potentially run into conflict with each other as to who has the right to fish those stocks.
Those foreseen problems, plus geopolitical tensions in our backyard, are reflected in today's major upgrade announcements. For watching the high seas, plans for non-weaponised space-based surveillance and communication systems, and drones.
We have a search and area responsibility that takes us all the way up to the Kiribati. Bear in mind that we're looking at establishing, inshallah, a marine reserve in the Kermadec. All of these things mean nothing if one cannot provide surveillance over that.
And to assist in humanitarian disasters, a second ship similar to HMNZS Canterbury.
This vessel will be able to move more vital stores and personnel with greater ability to operate in adverse conditions than is currently available to Canterbury. And I emphasise that climate change will require that.
There are also plans for a polar-ready Southern Ocean patrol vessel and new maritime helicopters in the mid to late 2020s for ground forces, armoured troop carriers and combat vehicles, and increasing the number of soldiers to 6,000 by 2035. The Chief of Defence, Air Marshal Kevin Short, says the investments are balanced across the three services, Army, Navy and Air Force, and he'll be glad to see the tail of the current Hercules for the last time.
While most of New Zealand sees them working really well, they're costing tens of millions of dollars each year more than we can expect with a new fleet.
Which is why that big ticket item, the Super Hercules, is at the top of the list, pegged to arrive in 2023. The Hercs are a workhorse, doing a bit of everything from paratrooper and humanitarian aid drops to ferrying scientists to Antarctica. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says the current ones are unreliable and no longer up to the task.
Our Hercules do our most basic of jobs. They get aid and they get some of our natural disaster responses around the country and around the Pacific. Without it, we just couldn't look after ourselves and our neighbours.
But National's Defence spokesperson Mark Mitchell says it's worrying the Hercules isn't going out to tender.
We should have competitive tension in any of those procurements that we're doing. That's the best way of delivering the best result for the taxpayer and for us as a country.
But Ron Mark says we're being offered the best price and competing aircraft aren't yet proven in the skies. He says the government will be careful though, and detailed business cases will be required for each of the major upgrades. For Checkpoint, Michael Crop there, Nay.
Auckland Council has become the latest to declare a climate emergency, joining Nelson, Christchurch and dozens of other cities around the world. In a packed meeting dominated by the voices of teenagers and young adults, the council made the declaration and agreed to look into how it can change its policies. The Mayor, Phil Goff, says failing to acknowledge climate change was an emergency would be irresponsible and reckless. The young people who pushed for the change warn they want to see more than words. Rowan Quinn reports.
Climate activists, young and old, erupt when the council votes to declare a climate change emergency. At the start of the day, they'd packed the public gallery, leaving standing room only. 4.5 hours later, most were still there.
Delighted and overwhelmed. Finally, after all that talk, they finally did it.
I feel like the whole world's just about to change. Well, I feel like Aotearoa is just about to change.
Yeah, and I feel like from this that we'll get some movement going.
Absolutely thrilled. It's a small step with what's happening internationally.
The meeting stood out for the presence and voices of the young people who turned out to have their say. Pia Kahui McConnell and Waiata Rameka Tupe, both 20, brought a symbol of environmental harm with them to the council table. A dead, stuffed New Zealand sea turtle named Tama Kahurangi, whose sustainable coastlines had tried to rescue off the Auckland coast.
When he passed away in their waka, and when they opened his stomach, they found a whole lot of plastic.
So there was things like plastic bags, bluebird chip packets, lollipop sticks, fish hooks, fishing wire, a whole heap of stuff that you could totally expect to find in a turtle's stomach nowadays.
A group of teens from Generation Zero was there to represent school students who'd marched against climate change twice this year. Luke Weejohn told the councillors the meeting time of 9:30 on a Tuesday was not a good time for school kids, so he hoped when they looked at the group they'd also see the thousands who'd marched around the country.
The School Strike for Climate is just
this will be the first election. There's a batch of them turning 18 and will be voting at the next election. So that was one thing I wanted to point out. And as more elections come, they'll be ageing up and there will be more of a youth presence.
But it wasn't just young people having their say. The group Extinction Revolution unfurled a long yellow banner across the whole room saying "Tell the Truth" when their representative Rosie G spoke. She said the council had been talking a good game, but experts showed only policy change and law change would work.
The use of long time frames and soft terminology such as encourage still gives a sense of low priority or even greenwashing. We need to set tough targets with CCOs and other businesses. We need to give up on the business as usual attitude and declare a climate emergency.
Council staff had warned climate change didn't match the definition of an emergency under the Civil Defence and Emergency Act. But perhaps reading the room and the upcoming election, many councillors said they'd been convinced that emergency was the right term to use. Rangatahi Freya Schonkel said all the youth there would be watching what happened next.
I hope people don't dwell on the fact and celebrate too much that an emergency was declared, and I hope that moves forward into momentum and action.
I Tamaki Makaurau mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
It is 5:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're keen to hear from you. You can text us about anything you've heard on the program today, 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Interested to see what you think of that climate change emergency declaration. Will it make a difference? What would you want to see it lead to? A petrified Wanaka woman who was forced to give birth on an office floor says no other woman should go through that experience, and the Southern DHB needs to provide adequate maternity services to the area immediately. Christy James, who gave birth to her son Mackay last Thursday, had planned to have her second child at Dunedin Hospital, but went into early labour, and Wanaka doesn't have a primary birthing centre. The office birth follows a roadside delivery in an ambulance near Lumsden after another woman didn't make it to hospital in time. Christy explains what happened the morning her son was born.
It was a really cold night. We had black ice that night. It was raining. I'm pretty petrified, to be completely honest with you, because I had been told by all of the professionals that the best place for me to be to birth my baby was in Dunedin. So once I realized it was all happening so quickly, I did, panic a little bit and start thinking about, well, what's going to happen? What if I do need to see, a doctor or have another C-section? I'm going to have to get choppered, and the roads are a mess. And how am I going to, how's this all going to play out? But
you were running through all the worst case scenarios in your head. Of course, yeah. Of course. I didn't have much time to think too much, but as soon as I turned up at the midwife's office, I looked at Deb and just said, what am I going to do, Deb? And she said, don't worry, you'll be fine, you'll be fine. She just examined me and realized that I was 10 centimetres and ready to push, and away we went. So what do you think? And it's interesting because you were campaigning for better maternity services during your pregnancy, and then the worst case scenario eventuates for you. What do you think about the fact that you had to give birth in an office space in Wanaka? Well, the DHB has been promising this maternal hub for I don't even know how long now. It's going on for months and months and months, and they still haven't delivered on it. So, pardon the pun, but let's push things forward here and get it happening. If we had at least a space that wasn't just an office, that had a dedicated area to be able to, deliver a baby, which allegedly this hub is going to have a space to have an emergency birth and all the equipment in it, in addition to apparently a couple of offices and things, then it would have been a much better scenario. I mean, ultimately, we need a primary birthing unit here. And better yet, we need a hospital in Central. I mean, not just for obstetric care, but for everything. So worst case scenario, I mean, I think had the DHB just pulled their fingers out and got this hub happening, then maybe I would have had a better situation. I mean, we were sitting in the office, and Deb had women coming in that she needed to see that day, and she had to call the cleaning service to get them to come clean the carpets, and they had to wait outside because we weren't ready to leave yet because I was so
and I was losing blood. So it's just all a bit, it's just ridiculous, really. We're so lucky. We're really, really lucky that we didn't have any complications. And, for a fairly high risk VBAC, it's not a very straightforward kind of no risk kind of situation. We were incredibly lucky, and I put that down to somebody out there looking after me because of the work that I have done on this cause over the last year and a bit. That's all I can think, and that's all that makes sense to me, is that this is all for a reason, to just get Mackay here safe and sound. And if that's what it was, then I'm happy with the result. But now it needs to change. It's just gone too far, and it's gone on for way too long, and there's no excuses anymore. I don't want anybody else to ever have to go through what I had to go through.
You will appreciate, obviously, that the DHB maintains that it's done all the research and looked at all the data about birth rates and what facilities are needed, and these hubs of what they have settled on. What would you say to them? If you could get their ear right now, what do you want to say to them?
I just want to say to them, what's it going to take for you to realize that your stats are wrong? Because there's all kinds of different opinions on what's needed, and there's so many different people that make these decisions. But what I would love for somebody to do is I would love for somebody to get in the car in Wanaka, have some kind of simulated labor, and have them drive down to Dunedin 3.5 hours in good weather and tell me if they think that is a safe situation. No midwife follows. You're on your own. God knows what the weather could be doing, and no wonder we're having babies on the side of the road and in offices, and we have the highest home birth rate in the whole country here in Wanaka, because nobody wants to do that. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely an unnecessary risk that we are putting our families and our babies in, and it has to come to an end. It's just not okay. And New Zealand is supposed to have this amazing kind of system in place that all other countries are following. And yes, we do have incredible midwives here that are incredibly capable, and we have excellent pre- and postnatal care. But for rural women and for rural LMCs, something needs to change. It's not enough.
And that is Christy James, who gave birth to her son Mackay in a Wanaka office. Now, Chris Fleming is the Chief Executive of the Southern DHB and joins me now on the line. Chris, how do you think this whole maternity hub model is working for women in Wanaka and Lumsden?
Well, look, the whole issue around maternity is very complex. The hub in Wanaka and in Lumsden, we have set up an interim hub. In fact, I'm grateful that Christy's birth did go well, but there is a hub in Wanaka. It is at the Wanaka Medical Centre, a matter of metres away from where Deb Harvey's office was located, and Deb had full access to that.
Do you think? Sorry to interrupt, but I just noticed you said that you're pleased that birth went well. Do you think that was a suitable situation?
Look, I think that the challenge around both firstly primary birthing and also secondary birthing is a huge challenge. We have implemented a model in Wanaka, but we have also recently signed a lease for a facility in Gordon Road in Wanaka to establish a more permanent hub while we think about where we are heading in the future in terms of both future, I heard the call for a primary birthing unit, and the volume of women birthing in Wanaka is growing and continues to grow, and we have always remained committed that we're on a journey. The second issue is about the complexity about secondary birthing, and those who do need to access obstetric care presently in terms of the New Zealand health system can only access secondary maternity where there is full 24/7 services, including anaesthesia, obstetricians, paediatricians, etc. And so that's a big challenge that we have to face in terms of where are we going to head in that wider Queenstown, Wanaka, Central Otago area, which of course is a long way away.
So when you say you're on a journey, well, that's all good and well, but not so much for the women who are needing to give birth in the near future. So just to be clear, is that maternity hub, you talk about another location and that's going to be developed further down the track, is the maternity hub in Wanaka up and ready, and what level of complexity could they deal with there in terms of a birth?
We have an agreement with the Wanaka Medical Centre. There is access, we've got specific access to the procedure room, which has all the necessary safety equipment for primary births. For anything that is more complex, that requires secondary care, absolutely, forward planning and moving to a secondary facility is a requirement, and that's a requirement all around the country.
So do you think women should
safely be provided?
Yeah, do you think women should have to run the gauntlet here with their pregnancies, take the risk? So, for example, you talk about forward planning. Well, Christy had forward planned. She planned to go to Dunedin. But the thing is, as you would appreciate, with pregnancies and births, things don't always go to plan. And that's the problem here, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's why we rely on a combination of robust planning and relationship with the midwives, the emergency response services that are available, and the backup of the secondary facilities. It is a complex issue, and it's not as something as simple as being able to open a secondary facility in that geographical area. But
why
when
not?
we look at the demographic, because you need 24/7 surgical services, medical surgical services. You would need a minimum of 4 obstetricians and 4 anaesthetists and paediatricians to make a viable, safe roster. If we try to do something like that with lesser resources, it would not be sustainable and it will not be safe.
So should those women in that area just miss out then?
No, it is a challenge right across the country, and in southern it is even more complex with large geographical areas. It's not possible to provide multiple 24/7 services across the vast region that we are.
So is it? Yeah, I understand what you're saying there. So then does it follow that it's unrealistic for women to feel safe and secure in their pregnancy and in their birth plan if they live in a small town like Wanaka? It's just unrealistic.
No, I think in terms of being open about the risks that are associated with the pregnancy, forward planning, and remember one of the things that the DHB has done in terms of prior to the establishment of the hub and then moving to the more permanent location later in the year, there was nothing other than whatever the midwife carried in her car. Whereas now there is a place for safe, urgent primary birth. It is a step forward, and we are going to have to continue to explore what do we do in that wider basin.
Right, you've said more than once that people need to plan well ahead. I'm just wondering what you mean by that. So how far in advance of their birth should they move to Dunedin or to a place where there is a hospital? How far ahead should they do that? In your view,
that has to be that would be a discussion individual by individual with the midwife. But
but there was that discussion. I suppose that's the point. There was a discussion between Christy James and her midwife, and we're just using this as an example. So she was sticking to the plan and had planned to travel ahead to Dunedin, but obviously things don't always go to plan. So I mean, realistically, do you expect these women to be spending 2, 3, 4 weeks in Dunedin waiting to have their babies just to be sure?
No, there are always going to be the challenges, and those challenges occur both in the rural areas and also even in the metropolitan areas where there are urgent births. It is one of the challenges, however, of living in a rural setting that those options and those issues do need to be discussed, and there will always be the challenging, the unexpected, urgent situations as Christy has experienced, and that's why we've put the infrastructure, the support, and we've recently, we've enhanced the emergency transport. The helicopters have been replaced by twin-engine helicopters to enable more inclement flying as well. So we're continually trying to improve the services, but it is challenging, particularly southern. The region that is as large as Belgium.
So doesn't it simply come down to, do women in rural areas deserve the same level of care and medical access in their pregnancies and births as women living in urban areas?
Every woman deserves access to appropriate services. The geographical challenges, however, make
equal
it physically
is what I'm saying. Equal.
But it's physically impossible to provide those services everywhere across a vast landscape.
So they just need to... So do they need to accept that inequity if they choose to live in a rural area? Is that what you're saying?
No, it is a challenge around how we provide robust services and ensure that appropriate transport and support is available.
We're almost out of time, but just before you go, are you going to make any immediate changes as a result of what happened in Lumsden or what happened here in Wanaka?
Well, we're about to do a post-implementation review of the model, but I just do need to reinforce the birth in an office. There was a procedure room immediately available with all the necessary emergency equipment for a primary birth that was available just around the corner in the same facility.
So what are you saying?
That we are confident that the primary birthing, the maternal and child hubs have appropriate safety equipment.
So do you think that this woman and the midwife chose not to go into that centre? Were they making a statement by having the child in an office?
Well, the office was in exactly the same building as the procedure room with all the emergency equipment within the same building.
Chris Fleming, Chief Executive of the Southern DHB, thanks for joining us this evening. And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, why witnesses to the mosque shootings don't think they're getting their fair share of donations. The Housing Minister on why wealthy New Zealanders should be able to access KiwiBuild along with everyone else. And was the half-brother of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un a CIA informant? We'd love to hear from you on anything you've heard on the program so far this evening. 2101 on the text, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And we're a little late to the headlines with Susanna.
The threat of climate change is underpinning a 10-year billion-dollar plan for upgrading the Defence Force. That includes $1 billion to replace the ageing Hercules fleet with new planes called Super Hercules. Defence Minister Ron Mark says the country has accepted responsibility for supporting smaller Pacific nations affected by warming oceans, rising seas and dwindling fish stocks. Sid Mahita of Generation Zero has put Auckland councillors on notice after they voted to declare a climate emergency this afternoon. He is one of a group of high school climate strikers who've told the council they want to see action on fighting climate change during this year's election. The submissions were led by teens and young adults who cheered as the council voted to move towards new policies to prevent climate change. A large group of witnesses to the Christchurch terror attacks are afraid they have been forgotten. Each witness has so far been given only $12,000, half of the $24,000 received by the injured, and almost a quarter of the $45,000 each for the bereaved. But witnesses to the shootings at Linwood Masjid say many are struggling with mental trauma and should receive the same as those injured physically. The acting GCSB minister says the finance minister put out his statement linking the National Party to claims of a hack half an hour before the spy agency said there had been no hack. It comes 2 weeks after the opposition published budget-sensitive information it found by searching the Treasury website. David Parker says the GCSB contacted the minister's office about 30 minutes after Grant Robertson made his statement. The Housing Minister says KiwiBuild is open to anyone who meets the criteria, which could include the wealthy. The first-time buyer scheme has income caps, but there is no asset testing. The KiwiBuild unit says a group of pre-approved buyers have said they could raise deposits of hundreds of thousands of dollars with the help of family. National says the scheme is supposed to be for those who struggle to buy on the open market. Those are our latest headlines. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Let's go to business now with Kim Savage. Prepare your wallet. Apparently, American discount wholesale chain Costco is coming to Auckland, Kim.
Surely this is a dream come true for anyone who's ever been to a shop intending to buy just one item and coming out with maybe 10 items. I have to say I'm guilty of that on the odd occasion, I'm afraid. So yes, Costco coming to Auckland. It's going to be setting up in Westgate out in West Auckland. So if you think that you can just walk in the doors and pick up these discounts without anything else, then you would be very sorely disappointed, though. There will be a membership involved here. This is an annual membership, and the company not saying at this stage just what that will cost. In Australia, it's $60 per year, and the company's indicated that it will probably look at an annual membership of around the same amount.
What?
So then that membership,
What? You have to
$60
sign
a year.
up. You have to sign up for the right to shop there.
But like I said, if you're a shopping addict and you go in there and you're looking to purchase quite a bit, the company sort of prides itself, and of course it's a global company, started in the US, very big name, of course, over in North America, and it prides itself on claiming that its prices are around 25 to 30% lower than what you get elsewhere. So we're talking about a fairly reasonable discount there. So for some people, this might be a new way for them to shop, getting this membership card and then going there and then receiving their discounts. So it's a pretty sizable location they've got there out at Westgate, 14,000 square metres they're talking about, and this is a warehouse operation. It's going to have the lot, the fuel station, the tyre centre, the food court, the optometrist, hearing aids will be available there, so really selling themselves as a one-stop shop. 800 car parks available there for shoppers, and will all come at a cost of approximately $90 million, so that all in the works now. Of course, this is the latest overseas brand to announce a presence here in New Zealand. We had recently IKEA, the flat pack company, announcing it's coming here, and Sephora, the beauty brand, is going to be opening a store. Quite a different offering from Costco, though, you have to say, walking into, a warehouse with bulk products versus, say, IKEA, which is more about the experience, the hot dogs, the meatballs, the walking around the store. So quite a different offering for customers, but perhaps suggesting that maybe New Zealand is seen as more of a destination now for these major companies, and that perhaps our population is sort of tipping up to that scale where they see us as a viable option for a store.
Interesting. We've been talking a bit about insurance lately, but this is about people being more worried about insuring their cars, Kim, than they are about insuring themselves. Is that just a cost thing, though?
Yeah, well, cost is kind of the obvious one, isn't it? Of course, it's a lot cheaper to insure your car than it is to insure your life. And of course, you're not going to have much luck when you're buying a house and you're seeking finance from the bank if you don't have insurance on your house. So I guess when you're looking at those comparisons, then things like cars and house and contents and things are perhaps coming first for people. But a study by the Financial Services Council, that organisation represents the life insurance industry, has found that perhaps mistrust is a little bit of an issue there as well. So apparently more than half of those surveys said that they'd given no thought to what they'd do to protect themselves in the event of illness, personal loss, health problems, and death, of course, is the other one there too. It also found that 2/3 of New Zealanders don't have sufficient savings to cover an unexpected short-term loss of income. So, income protection insurance essentially there. So people spending more time looking at insurance for their cars, for their homes and their contents, but not really thinking about if they die or if a family member dies. And the survey really found that people were thinking that they could rely on ACC or the government in some way to bail them out in the event of a health problem, or that friends and family perhaps would help them out. But the industry does admit too that affordability is an issue, and that it says it does need to take a look at that affordability, make sure the right products are available for the right people, and also do a lot to change perceptions and make sure that people understand that if they have insurance, that they will end up getting paid out if they make a claim. So really dealing with those mistrust issues that exist.
And what else has been happening on the markets today in the dollar?
Well, pretty good day on the market here in New Zealand. The NZX Top 50 finishing up 111 points, just over 1%, finishing Tuesday at 10,139. Auckland Airport, A2 Milk, Fletcher Building, Main Freight, some of the key drivers of those gains there. New Zealand dollar buying 65.9 US cents and 94.8 Australian.
Thanks, Kim. That's Kim Savage from Wellington with our business news. Now, some witnesses of the Christchurch Mosque shooting say they are being treated unfairly because of the way the donations to victims are being distributed. So far, $12,000 has been given to each witness compared to $45,000 to the bereaved and $24,000 to the injured. But worshippers at the Linwood Mosque say many of those who saw the attacks are struggling just as much as those with physical injuries and should be paid the same. And they're planning to present a petition to their local MP this week. Conan Young reports.
Abdul Aziz, who confronted the gunman during the Linwood shootings, knows of one man who has only been back to the mosque 3 times because he's terrified of a repeat incident.
Of them actually last year, all the 30 days of Ramadan, he was with us in the Tarawih and everything. This year we could see him only 3 times in the old Tarawih. I asked him, brother, why? He said, I'm still scared to get out of my house and because I think somebody come and kill my kids and kill me. You know, that sort of things, you know, it shows, you know, they're more wounded than a lot of other people, you know.
Abdulaziz says witnesses are often struggling as much, if not more, than some of those physically injured and should be paid the same as them. He'll this week present a 50-strong petition to local MP Megan Woods asking for this to happen.
Always when I was going in the media and everywhere, you know, you just heard deceased and injured. You know, they're injured as well, they're mentally injured.
Like everybody at the masjid, Azam Ali is struggling to move on with life, with memories of that fateful day still very fresh.
A wound heals, a scar heals, but what you see, you can't erase it. Even you look at it in medical terms, you can't erase what you see. I know there's kids over here, they're 5 or 6 years old. They were here on that day. And over Ramadan, I've seen them. When there's a bit of a noise, I see a 5-year-old kid goes like this.
Ali drives trucks for a living, but knows he's still in no fit state to get back behind the wheel of a 30-tonne vehicle. He says extra financial help from victim support would help to take the pressure off after weeks of not working. He knows of others who, not being eligible for ACC, have had no choice but to go back to work.
God forbid, if it's their family in front of their truck and the guy has a meltdown. You can't just stop it like that, but people are going back to work because of financial reasons. They still got to eat, they got to pay the bills, they got to pay the mortgage.
Many of those spoken to made the point that somebody who injured an arm while jumping a fence to flee the shooter was getting more money than somebody who witnessed truly horrific events. 12-year-old Mohammed Wahabzada says the sound of workers using nail guns often brings back memories of March the 15th.
My dad ran outside, so I ran outside with him because, you know, you just don't think at the moment. And, like, I was trying to throw rocks to get him avoided from my dad, and he, like, shot twice at me. He was able to dodge it. My dad dodged one through the car, throwing the ATM machine to get him distracted as well, which is kind of scary as well because, you know, you don't know what's going to happen.
Mohammed Samir, who feared for the life of his father and his 3 siblings, including his 5-year-old brother, still gets flashbacks.
While I was outside, I seen 3 dead bodies in front of me. I seen where the bullet entered the back of their head. Like, it's just pretty hard. Yeah, and I seen the gunman face to face. He shot at me 3 times.
Mohammed Samir says ultimately it's about respecting the wishes of the thousands of people who donated their money.
The people who donated it, if they specifically said, okay, this is for the, I'm donating this for the injured or for the deceased, okay, no worries, like, step back. But they didn't give a message saying, okay, this is for the deceased, this much for the injured, and, you know, nothing for the witnesses. Like, it was given for the victims, and we are all victims.
After being criticised for not consulting closely enough with the people they were trying to help, Victim Support held meetings with the Muslim community in Christchurch, asking how they thought the money should be divided up. The last tranche of money did include witnesses for the first time, even if it was much less than the amounts paid to the bereaved and injured. The final payment is due to be handed out by the end of this month, with a decision yet to be made on who will get what. Those spoken to at the Linwood Mosque are speaking out now in the hope Victim Support will hear their plea for equal recognition. Kei o te tahi aho mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Conan Young tēnei.
And let's go to some of your feedback now on the story about maternity services, really, in the southern DHB district, and whether maternity hubs, as they are known in some of the smaller towns, are enough. This person says women give birth all over the country and in poverty-stricken areas. One would argue that women living in the Wanaka region are amongst the most privileged in the country, statistically. The DHB is doing its best with few resources. Pre-planning has to be a factor, surely, if you live in rural areas. On the other side of the coin, though, this person has got in touch to say this birth centre BS should make us so angry. Why can there not be a birth unit there? I gave birth in Waihi Birth Centre. There's no obstetrician or surgeon there, but at least it's a dedicated birthing place. It seems different PHOs have different setups. And this one, does the Southland DHB spokesman understand anything about the biology of childbirth? Parents and midwives do not determine when natural births occur. Babies do. Should unborn babies be required to disclose their planned birth date to ensure access to equipped birthing units? Thanks for your feedback. Do keep it coming. You can text in on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. With 9/11 never far from their minds, New Yorkers today feared another terrorist attack when a helicopter crashed into a 54-storey building in downtown Manhattan. The pilot of the privately owned chopper died. Authorities have ruled out terrorism, but questions are being asked over why the helicopter was flying over a restricted area in bad weather. The BBC's Ramzan Kamali reports.
Smoke fills the New York air just moments after a helicopter crashed into the skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan.
There was a fire that happened when the helicopter hit the roof. People who were in the building said they felt the building shake. The fire department believes the fire is under control.
The crash took place close to the tourist hotspot, Times Square. For those inside, it was clear that something wasn't quite right.
You could feel the building shake. No one knew what it was. We thought like years ago when they had an earthquake and you felt the buildings here in Manhattan shake, we thought, well, that might have happened again. But when they said that a helicopter hit, we thought, a helicopter?
Thankfully, no debris fell from the building, despite the obvious impact the helicopter had on the building. The Mayor of New York expressed his relief that there was just one fatality. He was also quick to reassure New Yorkers. Many are still traumatised by the events of 9/11.
I want to say the most important thing first. There is no indication at this time that this was an act of terror, and there is no ongoing threat to New York City based on all the information we have right now.
The pilot of the twin-engine helicopter died and was the only person on board. Weather conditions were poor with heavy rain and fog. Now officials say that why the aircraft was flying in such poor weather will be part of the investigation.
And that's Ramzan Kumali reporting there. Now, a few of you may have been following the story that we have been looking into about 9-year-old Ngatapuna Reala from the Cook Islands. She was separated from her legal guardian, 71-year-old Mark Pierce, at Los Angeles Airport on May the 25th and spent almost 2 weeks in a detention facility in the US. Mr. Pierce said during that time, Puna did not have any contact with her family. In breaking news, the Cook Islands government has confirmed that Puna is now reunited with her family in Aitutaki. The statement says the Cook Islands government understands US Customs and Border Protection found questionable material on Mark Pierce's phone. Mark Pierce had his phone and laptop seized and he was detained for 11 hours and separated from Puna. Puna was held at a juvenile immigrant centre, Southwest Key, which confirmed to Checkpoint today that they are trying to find answers as to why she was held for so long and why Puna had no contact with her family. The facility's purpose is to make all efforts to reconnect children with their families. And the Cook Islands government says it will keep discussing the incident with New Zealand and US authorities, and a review is underway. The Housing Minister says KiwiBuild is not a welfare scheme and wealthy New Zealanders should be able to access it along with everybody else. Phil Twyford has once again had to defend the flagship house building policy designed for those struggling to get into the housing market. The KiwiBuild unit says there's a group of pre-approved buyers who've declared they could raise deposits of up to $650,000, some with the help of family members. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
KiwiBuild has long been sold as a way for those who otherwise couldn't afford to buy into the housing market to become homeowners. It has income caps for applicants but no means testing for first home buyers. The Housing Ministry released details to RNZ of more than 500 pre-approved buyers, noting there could be input errors in the data. The KiwiBuild unit subsequently confirmed there was a group who declared they could raise more than $300,000 for a deposit, including 3 who said they could stump up with $650,000 with help from their parents or other family members. National's housing spokesperson Judith Collins says the scheme should not be for wealthy New Zealanders.
It is a welfare scheme for developers, and what's increasingly obvious, it's now a welfare scheme for New Zealanders who have plenty of money that they can get from their parents or somewhere else.
KiwiBuild's head of delivery, Helen O'Sullivan, says the scheme is about increasing housing supply.
There is a misconception that these homes are subsidised. They're not subsidised. What the scheme is doing is facilitating the delivery of modest and affordable starter homes, which you still have to pay for. So you still actually need to have sufficient income and sufficient financial backing to actually purchase the homes.
The Housing Minister, Phil Twyford, stands by the current rule.
KiwiBuild is not asset tested, and we are not going to ban the bank of mum and dad or people who have access through their family who have an asset.
Another eligibility criteria is you either have to be a first home buyer or a second chancer, someone who's previously owned their own home but who meets an asset test. Depending on where they live, a second chancer can only have assets, including a cash deposit of up to $120,000. Mr Twyford says he has no intention of imposing an asset test on the first home buyers, who should be free to get money from their family.
It's as Kiwi as Pavlova and anything else that people should be able to mobilise family resources. Look, the last government announced a policy several years ago to give $20,000 cash up front to first home buyers with no asset testing.
Judith Collins says there are now so many problems with KiwiBuild, Mr Twyford should just shut up shop.
Well, I think KiwiBuild should just be killed. Actually, it's of no use to anybody other than some developers who are struggling in many cases to sell properties in places that other people didn't necessarily want to live in.
Phil Twyford will soon take a reset paper to Cabinet to help encourage more developers to get on board after he had to drop KiwiBuild's annual targets. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
And some more feedback in on maternity services in the southern DHB district. This person says a little bit of realism, medical services in Wanaka, please. Us rural dwellers don't have as quick access to ED or ICU as do urban dwellers. That's just how it is when you live in the country. Expecting secondary maternity services in small towns is narcissistic nonsense. And this one as well, as a rural woman, I accept that it is not possible to have equal access as urban women do to the same birthing options. An obstetric unit, a NICU and the necessary support services in each local town is unrealistic and not feasible. And expecting Chris Fleming to say this is achievable is not helpful. If these facilities were provided in Queenstown, it might not even have helped these women have a better birthing experience. As Lisa pointed out, in some cases, the birth progresses just too quickly. Thanks for getting in touch. Our text is 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. There are reports in US media that Kim Jong-nam, the half-brother of the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, was a CIA informant. Kim Jong-nam was killed at Kuala Lumpur airport in 2017 after a nerve agent was smeared on his face. The Wall Street Journal, citing an unnamed source, says there was a nexus between Kim Jong-nam and the CIA. Kim Jong-nam's role as a CIA informant is also mentioned in a new book about Kim Jong-un by Washington Post reporter, New Zealander Anna Fifield. It says security camera footage from Kim Jong-nam's last trip to Malaysia showed him in a hotel elevator with an Asian-looking man who was reported to be a US intelligence agent. Daniel Pinkston, a professor of international relations from Troy University in the US, told CNN the reports are highly plausible.
Even at the time of his death, there were reports in South Korean media that he had been providing information to South Korea's National Intelligence Service, and he had been working for the North Korean regime about 20 years ago or so, involved with their arms exports. I have credible information about that, but he continued to live in Macau and lived a high-profile lifestyle and kind of playboy lifestyle. So there had been questions about his income and how he had money to live that lifestyle.
Daniel Pinkston says Kim Jong-nam also fell out of favour with his father, leading the way for his brother Kim Jong-un to become leader.
With Kim Jong-nam being shut out and no longer the successor to his father Kim Jong-il, questions arose how he had income and how he was able to continue his lifestyle. And certain Kim Jong-un, as the anointed successor, would prudently take control of the finances in those accounts. So I think it's a plausible story that he was working or providing information in exchange for cash, whether it was the CIA or South Korea's National Intelligence Service. That remains to be seen. I can only speculate about that, but I think it's a very plausible story.
Daniel Pinkston from Troy University. Anna Fifield's book on Kim Jong-un, The Great Successor, is due for release tomorrow in the US, and as you can imagine, it is expected to attract a lot of attention. It is about 5 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Don't forget you can get in touch by text 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Canada is a big country and it uses 15 billion plastic bags and 57 million plastic straws every year. Just 10% of its plastic waste is recycled. In a bid to reduce plastic consumption and pollution, the government has announced that it will ban single-use plastics as early as 2021. But some say it's a knee-jerk reaction and there's no clear plan. The CBC's Hannah Thibodeau reports.
At Constance Pop Chocolate Shop in Winnipeg, they already use compostable material to wrap all their goodies. Chocolatier Ray Terra says it's worth it, but it does affect this small business's bottom line.
Well, for us, it's more expensive because there's only one producer.
The Liberal government wants more businesses to move in that direction. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his government is banning single-use plastics as early as 2021.
It's going to take a little bit of time to make sure we get it absolutely right because this is a big step.
The full list of banned items hasn't been firmed up, and the government hasn't said what specific actions will be taken to increase recycling or how this will affect Canadians working in the plastics industry. That industry has a big economic footprint in Canada, worth about $35 billion in sales in 2017, and it employs 93,000 workers. On the other hand, the recycling industry generated about $350 million in revenue, and there are about a dozen recycling companies with 500 employees. But Trudeau says expect that industry to grow.
By recycling or reusing these plastics, we can reduce pollution, generate billions of dollars in revenue, and create approximately 42,000 jobs across the country.
This is clearly just a government that's clutching at straws.
Opposition leader Andrew Scheer says the details are lacking.
We see another gesture without a plan, without any kind of specifics on how this would be implemented or any kind of study on the impact on prices for consumers, on jobs.
Dan Kelly, the president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, says they weren't consulted, and he's calling for a study on the economic impacts.
There's no question that there could be job losses from some of the parties that are involved in this, and that needs to be thought about.
Stephen McLeod's Montreal company provides compostable products. His company is already growing.
So now that the government's talking about it, it's really picking up. I mean, we're already seeing much more demand.
McLeod hopes demand will grow even more when the full details are announced in a couple of months.
And that was Hannah Tabido reporting there. Back to our story about maternity services in the southern DHB catchment. Amy has got in contact and says, I live in Wanaka and had my second baby whilst living here. My midwife strongly urged me to travel to Dunedin to give birth due to the lack of facilities here, which I did, giving birth 1 hour after arriving in Dunedin. I've since heard some pretty hairy stories of roadside births and consider myself lucky. A quick labour in the car on the 3.5-hour drive was hardly ideal. Wanaka and Queenstown are experiencing significant sustained growth and the southern DHB needs to get with the program. At the very least, we should have a temporary service over the winter months when driving conditions are dicey. Thanks for getting in touch, Amy. And this one says, in regard to the lady giving birth in Wanaka at the medical centre, there is a birthing centre at Queenstown Hospital 50 minutes away. There is a real problem with people moving to Queenstown and Wanaka and expecting big city health. It is a well-documented international issue, not unique to New Zealand, that those in rural areas do not have the same access to healthcare facilities. And on Costco coming to New Zealand, I raised my eyebrow when I found out that it was a $60 membership fee just to shop there. This person says the cost of joining is nothing. The discounts are great. I am wearing a coat right now that I purchased in Costco in 2010. Do send us a pics, 2101. Savings and options are with the $60 membership fee. And on the Defence Force spend up, this person says to use climate change as an argument for upgrading military planes is deeply cynical. Are we looking forward to some kind of action thrill in racing to disaster zones in the Pacific? I am horrified, they say.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leātawa tēnei. The threat of climate change has underpinned a $20 billion plan to upgrade the country's defence capabilities over the next decade. Nearly every major item is earmarked for an upgrade as part of the Defence Force's latest capability plan. Catherine Hutton reports.
The plan included $1 billion upgrading the country's ageing Hercules fleet with new planes called Super Hercules. The Defence Minister Ron Mark said New Zealand had accepted responsibility to support smaller Pacific nations, which involves dealing with the impact of climate change, including warmer oceans, rising seas and dwindling fish stocks. He says over time there will be an increased requirement for our defence forces to respond with humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. To assist in humanitarian disasters, a second ship similar to Canterbury will be commissioned, which will be able to move vital stores and personnel and can operate in more adverse conditions than the Canterbury. This is Catherine Hutton.
The Housing Minister says the KiwiBuild scheme is open to anyone who meets the criteria, including the very wealthy. There are income caps, but there's no asset means testing for first-time home buyers, including cash in the bank. The KiwiBuild unit says there's a group of pre-approved buyers who've declared they could raise deposits of up to $650,000, some with the help of family. National says the scheme's supposed to be for those who'd struggle to buy on the open market. The Minister, Phil Goff, says first home buyers should be free to get money from their family.
It's as Kiwi as Pavlova and anything else that people should be able to mobilise family resources. Look, the last government announced a policy several years ago to give $20,000 cash up front to first home buyers with no asset testing.
The Housing Minister, Phil Goff. The Southern District Health Board Chief Executive has defended maternity care in Otago and Southland following several deliveries outside birthing units. A Wanaka woman gave birth on an office floor last Thursday when she couldn't get to Dunedin Hospital in time. The office delivery follows a birth in an ambulance on a roadside near Lumsden when another woman didn't make it to a primary birthing centre. But the Southern DHB's Chief Executive, Chris Fleming, has told Checkpoint it's not as simple as opening another unit in Otago. He says there aren't enough professional medical staff in the area to make a full roster. But Mr Fleming says a primary birthing centre for Wanaka hasn't been ruled out in the future. A large group who witnessed the Christchurch Mosque shootings fear people like them have been forgotten about. To date, out of the millions that have been donated, only $12,000 has been given to each witness. compared to $45,000 for the bereaved and $24,000 to the injured. But worshippers at the Linwood Masjid say many witnesses have struggled just as much, if not more, than those with physical injuries through the mental trauma they have suffered and should be paid the same. Shooting witness Mohammed Samir says it is about honouring the wishes of those who donated their money. He says most donors did not differentiate between witnesses, the injured and the bereaved, when stipulating where the money should go. The final payment from victim support is due to be handed out by the end of this month, with a decision yet to be made on who will get what. The government has cleared up the timeline of when senior ministers were informed about GCSB's advice that Treasury's website had not been hacked. It laid out who knew what and when, following questions from the opposition in Parliament this afternoon. Political reporter Yvette McCullough has more.
The office of the minister responsible for GCSB, Andrew Little, first spoke to the GCSB at 8:43 p.m. This was about half an hour after the finance minister put out a statement linking the National Party to claims of a hack. Mr Little relayed the GCSB's advice to the Prime Minister's office shortly before 10 p.m. and to Grant Robertson at 10:25 p.m. via text message. National leader Simon Bridges asked Jacinda Ardern why the government didn't immediately correct the record that there had been no hack. Ms Ardern says they didn't want to comment further as the matter was before the police, but she says they did change their language to unauthorised access. From Parliament, Yvette McCullough.
The police watchdog has found a custody officer used excessive force when he threw a man into a wall, then continued trying to restrain him. The Independent Police Conduct Authority says the man had been arrested for breaching his bail and was intoxicated when taken to the county's Manukau station 2 years ago. Its General Manager Warren Young says the authority found the officers also failed to tell a doctor the man may have suffered a head injury.
It's important that those who are in custody are treated appropriately and with restraint. In this particular case, because we have found the force is excessive, then there may potentially be criminal or employment consequences.
County's Manukau District Commander Superintendent Jill Rogers says the officer was sanctioned but remains in the police. It's 6:05. There's no chance for the football Ferns to ease their way into the World Cup in France tonight, with the side playing the European champions, the Netherlands, first up. The 19th ranked Ferns are chasing their first win at a finals with their aim to advance from group play. That'll probably require at least one win and a draw, and captain Ali Riley concedes achieving either of those results against the Dutch will be tough.
They have players who are very, very good individuals playing at top clubs all around the world. A lot of focus has been on their attacking threat, and that's something that we obviously aren't going to take lightly. We also face that against England, we face that against the USA, and we've had learnings from all of these preparation games, I think, that are going to make us prepared for this game.
Ali Riley. Kick-off is at 1 a.m. Meanwhile, the Wellington Phoenix have lost long-time skipper Andrew Durante. After 11 years with the Wellington club, the 37-year-old has confirmed he's leaving, with reports suggesting he'll join former Phoenix coach Mark Gruden at the newly established Western United in Melbourne. The struggling Warriors have been hit by another obstacle ahead of their NRL Rugby League match on the Gold Coast on Friday night. Hoping to bounce back from their fourth straight home defeat last weekend and their eighth loss from the 12 matches this season, 4 Warriors players missed today's training with a stomach bug. Players affected included key playmaker Blake Green, veteran hooker Isaac Luke and inform utility player Carl Lawton. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Kirsten Johnstone has a song crush on Sleater Kenny, among others. We have a window on the world of Down's syndrome in Tanzania, or at least the world of those who have it. And Anne Kerwin discusses the philosophy of Elaine Leroy Locke, father of the Harlem Renaissance, the rise of African-American consciousness in the United States. All on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Metsu West to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel, mainly fine with isolated showers. Occasional rain developing tomorrow. Waitomo to Manawatu, Taupo, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Mostly cloudy. Isolated showers in the west, fine in the east. Rain spreading from the north tomorrow with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms in Bay of Plenty. Horowhenua to Wellington, mostly cloudy with a few showers clearing tomorrow morning. Nelson, a few showers developing this evening, turning to rain tomorrow morning. morning and easing later in the day. For Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly cloudy with occasional rain developing tomorrow. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain with some heavy falls easing to scattered showers tomorrow morning, gradually clearing from the afternoon. Southland and Otago, high cloud thickening, scattered rain developing from tomorrow afternoon, but clearing by tomorrow evening. Chatham Islands, cloudy at times, a few showers developing tomorrow. It's coming up to 6:08.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. We have an obligation to act and it would be irresponsible and reckless not to. Those are the words of Auckland Mayor Phil Goff after New Zealand's largest city declared a climate emergency today. Auckland Council is the latest to signal urgent action against climate change following Christchurch and Nelson last month. Mayor Phil Goff joins me now. Good evening, Phil.
Good evening, Lisa.
I mean, it sort of sounds like a good bumper sticker, but what does it actually mean in real terms?
Yeah, well, it's no good if it's just a bumper sticker. It's got to actually be converted into action because that's what counts. I mean, what does the emergency declaration do? It simply emphasises the urgency of what we're looking at. And, you know, that's already done by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, where the top international scientists are saying you've got barely 10 years to do this, or the results will be catastrophic environmentally and economically. So it's emphasising that point. What we also passed today was a climate action framework, and that's one step along the way. Our next step is to consult on that and then to convert it to an action plan where it sets out detailed actions that we can take as a council, costings of those actions and what the source of revenue will be. That's what really counts in this rather than simply the declaration.
Can you give me one material thing that you think will eventuate from this? One actual form of action?
Yeah, I think that the critical area will be transport, and the critical area in which the council will need to act is the area of diesel buses. We're currently trialling 3 diesel buses. We'll soon increase that to 12, but actually we need to convert our whole diesel fleet to electric as we phase out the diesel buses at the end of life. And
sorry to interrupt, Phil.
The biggest thing we can do.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but will the emergency declaration means that happens any faster or in any way different to what it would have done otherwise?
Yeah, I think what we got was a greater awareness around the council table that this has to be front and centre of the actions that we take. For example, we are now requiring from council that any proposal, any project we're working on, that there's a climate impact report from that action. Now, government does that in terms of, financial report and well-being impact. We need to do that around climate change. I think, today was great. It was great mainly because, hey, the kids that were there today were the kids that will be actually feeling the real impact of this long after you and I have departed from this earth. And they brought that sense of urgency to the council. This is the world we're growing up in. This is the world your kids and your grandkids are growing up in. Don't leave us a rotten legacy of having to face something that's going to devastate our lives, affect our quality of life, and affect the environment that we live in.
But this declaration has no legal status, does it? And it has no statutory obligations attached to it all. So
it is a statement that we need to deal with this urgently, and the statement accompanying that was this isn't just a thing that council can do, it's what the community has to do, the council has to do, the country has to do, and what we need to do internationally. And unless we all pull our weight on that, unless we all play our part, we will be paying dearly in 10 years' time, much more than the cost of dealing with preventive action now.
But my point in asking you that, Mr. Mayor, is that there's no way to hold you to this emergency declaration other than to kick you out next time if you don't act fast enough.
Isn't that the main way that you hold politicians accountable? I would have thought that that's what really focused their minds. Yes, it has no statutory impact, it has no legal impact, but this is a statement of what we need to do and a statement of our acceptance of the urgency in doing it. And I think that's really important because, what we have to do as a council, because there is a cost associated with dealing with climate change, is that we have to carry our community with us. We have to lift the level level of awareness. We have to lift the level of education.
So are you warning us?
This is a priority for us.
Are you warning us of a rates increase if we want to have climate change action? Is that the underlying message here?
If you look at it as a country as a whole, whether you're a ratepayer or a taxpayer, will we have to spend money to mitigate the effects of climate change and to adapt to the impact of climate change? Of course we will. We've already in our long-term plan put $40 million in towards climate change and $90 million in towards managing our coasts. But this is because we know the impact of these things are happening now. NIWA tell us that the rainfall patterns are changing. We're getting more extreme weather events. The ice caps, both northern and southern hemisphere, are melting and the sea level is rising. And you and I will find that we live in a city within a very short period of time where literally hundreds and then thousands of houses will not be insurable and will not be inhabitable because of the effects of climate change. So none of us pretend that we're not going to have to spend money to deal with this situation. We will.
Thanks for joining us. That's Mayor Phil Goff on the back of Auckland Council declaring a climate emergency. It is 13 after 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The government has finally given some clarity around the timeline of who knew what and when regarding Treasury Secretary Gabriel Maklouf's claim Treasury's website had been hacked. Senior ministers were grilled in Parliament about when they were advised of the GCSB's warning that there had not been a hack by the National Party and why they didn't correct the record sooner. Here's political reporter Yvette McCullough on how things played out in Parliament.
It was left to David Parker today, on behalf of the minister responsible for the GCSB, Andrew Little, to give a clear timeline of the events surrounding Hackgate.
At 8:02 p.m, Treasury issued its press release. At 8:43, my office first spoke to the GCSB. At 9:43 p.m, Minister Little spoke to the GCSB. At 9:52 p.m, Minister Little contacted the Prime Minister's office, and at 10:25 p.m, Minister Little contacted Minister Robertson by text.
Meaning that the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister were told there was no hack 2 hours after statements were issued saying the budget information released by National was obtained that way.
Didn't her government sit on a fundamental mistruth all of Wednesday?
Speaker, no.
National leader Simon Bridges repeatedly asked Jacinda Ardern why she didn't clear up the incredibly false impression that National was behind a hack.
We followed the advice we were given and used the word unauthorised access.
Instead of changing her language, why didn't she do the right thing and publicly make clear there was no criminal hacking?
We did not know whether what had occurred was criminal or not. We simply did not have that advice.
Jacinda Ardern says the matter was with the police, and that is where the government rightly left it.
We still at that point did not know who was responsible, so I know the member saw it as an allegation against him. We didn't necessarily see it that way at the time.
Finance Minister Grant Robertson was also asked why he didn't immediately set the record straight.
The matter had been referred to the police. I did not use the words that are upsetting the member after that time. I simply referred to the advice that I'd had by the Treasury.
Mr Robertson dodged questions about what further information he sought from Treasury Secretary Gabriel Maklouf about what he was basing his serious allegations on.
As with all of my interactions with the Treasury, there were questions asked, but those matters are part of the State Services Commission investigation, and I do not want to prejudice that inquiry any further than the comment that I've already made.
While the public remains in the dark on this element of the hack saga, it shouldn't be for much longer, with the State Services Commission indicating it wants the inquiry into Maklouf's handling of this wrapped up before he leaves his role at the end of the month. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
Refugees arriving in New Zealand are being forced to stay at the Auckland Resettlement Centre beyond their initial arrival program because there are no homes available for them to move into. Refugees typically spend 6 weeks at the centre in Mangere, preparing for life in this country, receiving English language classes, health screening and support. But of the 1,000 people who arrived at the centre last year, nearly half of them had to stay longer than expected. Immigration New Zealand National Refugee Manager Andrew Lockhart told our reporter Nita Blake-Person that it's another symptom of the massive housing pressures in this country.
This is not peculiar to refugees. Housing is a challenge in New Zealand full stop, and we have to make sure that we have for them a safe, warm and affordable home.
So over the past year, how many people stayed longer than their 6 weeks?
I think in this financial year it's around about the 400 mark, and as I said, that will vary from a few days to up to a month or even longer, depending on where we're locating them and finding them the house itself.
What was the longest someone stayed?
90 days, I think, is the longest we've had somebody. That case was a larger family, so larger houses are sometimes more difficult to find.
Is this quite disappointing for those people? They finally made it here, arrived here, only to find the waiting continues?
Well, I think for them, the program at Mangere is really important. When they come to the end of the program and they remain there, then the schooling for the children continues, and the adults can continue to participate in parts of the program like English language and other areas. I think they're keen to get on with their lives, but they recognise that housing is important for them to be able to move into when they first move into the community.
Does it put quite a squeeze on resources at the centre with that many people staying on longer?
The site itself can take up to 264 people. Usually each intake has around about 170 people on it. So there is accommodation there. There are 2 new blocks that were built to accommodate both the 1,000 and now the 1,500.
Does this make you worried for future arrivals, that there's just such a squeeze on the limited housing that's available?
Well, I think with the quota increase, this was an area that was recognised, that the housing was recognised right at the stage when decisions were made by government, and government have funded additional public housing for refugees, and to account for refugees, and the pre-rent, and then the work that we'll need to have in place to make sure that we've got private housing where that's needed as well.
And that was Andrew Lockhart speaking to our reporter Nita Blake-Person. A lawyer acting for the internet entrepreneur Dotcom has told the Supreme Court they must not speed date the Copyright Act. They need to have a detailed understanding of it. Ron Mansfield says if they do that, they will realise the lower courts were wrong in ruling Mr Dotcom and his co-accused could be extradited to face copyright charges in the US. Anne-Marie May has been at the hearing.
Ron Mansfield today told the Supreme Court that the Court of Appeal's handling of the Copyright Act upset the careful balance of rights and remedies prescribed in it by Parliament. He says civil liability is the usual way copyright infringement is brought before a court, but the United States argument in the case is that the wrongdoing is a criminal offence.
The United States says that there is infringement by Mega Upload as the internet service provider. We don't agree. They say that the infringement meets the requirements for an offence under Section 131. Again, we don't agree. Further, the United States asserts that it can rely on general dishonesty crimes under the Crimes Act.
He says there are several reasons that suggest Dotcom's website Mega Upload did not breach copyright.
Each of the offences require either that the person possessing the file was in the course of business, or in relation to distribution, which the United States also rely on, also requires this additional element that whoever is involved in the distribution be in the course of business.
Ron Mansfield says the requirement for infringements to occur in the course of business was important because Parliament did not intend that mums, dads and kids who might copy something and give it to someone else be caught under that law. He says the section of the Copyright Act the US refers to was always intended to deal with commercial offending, which led to this exchange with Justice Glazebrook.
And this isn't commercial offending, why?
Because you have to look at, who's in possession. Mega Upload was never in possession of the infringing works. Further, it was never Mega Upload who distributed. It was always the user.
The case is expected to run for the rest of the week. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Anne-Marie May.
And to our earlier story on Auckland Council declaring a climate emergency, Julia says, Phil, free public transport and tax private car use to fund this. Anything less isn't treating this as an emergency. And someone else has been in touch to say, I'm glad I don't have kids. Diesel buses and more reports? Really? As 10 Conservative Party members in Britain vie to replace Theresa May as Prime Minister and party leader, it's Boris Johnson who's the front runner. 10 candidates have put themselves forward. The list will be whittled down to 2 in a series of ballots before a final vote by the party's grassroots membership in July. Whoever wins will face the huge challenge of finally delivering Brexit. With more, here's the ABC's Samantha Hawley.
One after another, MPs declared their candidacy, from the former Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab.
This is a crossroads in our history. We're on the cusp of momentous change.
To the Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt.
Our failure to deliver Brexit has put our country and our party in grave peril.
In all, 10 MPs vying for the job, left vacant by Theresa May.
And that is why I am now ready to unite.
Michael Gove, just days before seen as one of the main contenders, launched his campaign with gusto.
Ready to deliver, ready to lead.
But really all attention was on how he wasn't leading by example and his cocaine-snorting past.
You're stand-in for the most important job in this land, but can the public really trust you when you privately take cocaine and then publicly condemn middle-class professionals that do that in a newspaper column?
To take the second one first. I've acknowledged that I made a mistake.
The drug use revealed in a soon-to-be-released biography was difficult to defend, given as Education Minister, Mr Gove had taken a strong anti-drug stance, banning convicted teachers for life.
Boris Johnson's chances are enormously improved by this setback for Michael Gove.
John Rentoul is a commentator for the Independent newspaper.
It's just the timing of it will unsettle Conservative MPs. They're less likely to make Michael Gove the other candidate, because what the MPs do is they choose 2 candidates and then the party members have to choose between them. Michael Gove's whole strategy was to be the rival to Boris Johnson in that final round. And now I think his place will probably be taken by Jeremy Hunt, the Foreign Secretary.
Within 6 weeks, the new leader will be known, and there's a growing sense a general election may follow. Boris Johnson hasn't addressed the press for months.
Yes, of course you can. If I get in, we'll come out deal or no deal.
He launched his campaign on YouTube.
Thank you very much. Would that make
known for past gaffes, silence could work in his favour.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Samantha Hawley there from London. The football Ferns coach, Tom Sermanni, says his FIFA Women's World Cup players are not there for the experience as they chase their first ever win in the tournament. The Ferns open their campaign against European champions, the Netherlands, tonight. Sermanni took over the role in October last year when previous coach Andreas Haraf stood down following complaints from many of his players. The Glaswegian took Australia to the World Cup 3 times and went once with Canada. He also spent 2 years coaching the US. 2019 will be 64-year-old Sermanni's 5th World Cup, and he told Barry Guy the players are sensing the expectation of the nation.
It's exciting. It's kind of like going back to, in a sense, of where I started with the Australian team. You know, I had them in the first World Cup, and then I came back, several years later to take them to another World Cup, and we were in a similar position where by that stage Australia still hadn't won a game and they were still at that sort of level of development. And, it's that kind of scenario here with New Zealand, and a lot of similarities in the sense of experience of players and players who feel that they're ready now to go into a World Cup and actually make an impact.
The progression has been, rising, and now there is some expectation there. Do you sort of realise that in the squad that you've got there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always been expectation in this team and amongst the players. We've got a really solid core of professional players now who play all over the world. So when you've got that, and we've had the experience that these players have, they've got a certain expectation. They want to go in, they want to play well, obviously individually, collectively, but they also want to get results, and they're very keen to do that, and they've been working hard towards doing that. And, it'll be a great reward for them and for the journey that they've been on if we can go to a World Cup and perform well, but also get results.
Have you been able to bring something, there's plenty of experience on the Football Ferns side, but have you brought something of your own World Cup experience?
It's hard to say, specifically what you bring, but I think, having been to several World Cups now, that probably the factor that I can bring is having a bit better knowledge on what it takes to prepare for a World Cup. I remember from my first World Cup, I made the mistake of being on the road for too long with the team before we actually got to the World Cup. So by the time they got there, the team was jaded. So, I think just that experience of going through it a few times, what it's going to be like when you walk out in your first game, what the organisation's going to be like when you get there, what the expectations are. So I think having that knowledge helps a little bit when it comes to the preparation.
I've spoken to a number of the players, of course, and they want to get a win and get out of the group.
I think there's times when you want to play the game, and I think there's times when you need to be looking at, say, doing something concrete. I think if this was, say, the first World Cup for New Zealand and the first World Cup for a lot of the players, then you could say, look, we just want to play well, enjoy this experience and make the most of it. But for some of the players, this is the fourth World Cup in a row, and they haven't had that feeling of winning a game. So it's different in that sense that the players want to get a result in this World Cup. We all want to get a result. And so it's about the experience, but it's also about getting that result. Sometimes it's good not to have specific aims, but I think sometimes, and in this case, I think it's a good thing to actually have something specific to aim for.
And Tom Samani, the coach of the Football Ferns, talking to Barry Guy after the New Zealand play Canada and Cameroon. And just before we go, I couldn't have anticipated the excitement that some of you are feeling about Costco coming to New Zealand. Vicky says it's an amazing store. Bought yoga pants in 2014, wear them most days, super cheap too. But even more important is their reputation for good wages and conditions for their workers, and they still manage to make a good profit. And also Dave says he belonged to Costco in 1980. Good bulk deals. 300 rolls of toilet paper will last you forever, Dave. Well, I should hope so, Dave, or else you've got an issue. Special shout out tonight to Otis, 3-year-old Otis, who's been watching his mum Claire direct the show. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Let's do it again tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Defence Minister says over time there will be more need for the Defence Forces to respond with humanitarian assistance and disaster relief to Pacific nations. The Housing Minister says first home buyers should be free to get money from their family in response to criticism of KiwiBuild applicants having high deposits. The government has cleared up the timeline of when senior ministers were informed about GCSB's advice that Treasury's website had not been hacked, and a police officer found guilty by the police watchdog for using excessive force when he threw a man into a wall remains in the police. Our next news is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
Even though we weren't involved in the actual shooting, our contribution to defeating Islamic State has been very significant.
Lately with me, Karen Hayes, your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
People who have been around the block, who have got 20 to 30 years experience, can add such great value